If you want to future-proof your career and you're listening to this podcast today, I think what you have to have that capability is reach out in the universe and create demand for your product or service.
How do you assess to see if they have the traits and skills or just even the makeup to be a leader?
One of the things would be,
most sales teams are stuck in a cycle of doom, chasing deals, closing a few, then scrambling to fill an empty pipeline all over again. Now, if that sounds familiar, this episode is your roadmap out. Welcome to the Learn It All podcast, the show for today's leaders who want to get ahead and stay ahead, because we believe great leaders aren't born or made, they are constantly in the making. I'm your host, Damon Lemby, two-time best-selling author and CEO of Learn It, a live learning platform that has helped upskill over 2 million people over the past 3 decades. Our guest today is Mark Cox, one of the top thought leaders in B2B sales and the author of a great new book called Learning to Love Sales. Mark and I plan on delivering a deep dive into his 4-part sales playbook. You're going to learn why discovery is where the sale is won or lost, and the secret to find your company's real competitive differentiator. Are the best salespeople naturally gifted, or can it be a learned skill?
it can be a learned skill. So yeah, that's the short answer. I'm a big fan of Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, which talks about a fixed mindset and growth mindset. And when you get into the depth of some of her research, it sort of proves that any of us can learn anything. And when we're recruiting or interviewing for salespeople, Damon, we look for intelligence, drive, humility, passion, and optimism. So when you look at those things, we could have an introvert who's a really good salesperson. We could have an extrovert who's a great salesperson. We could have an ambivert who's a great salesperson. So great salespeople are made, they're not born.
So this show is all about, well, a lot about learning. And I've heard you talk about it in your book and elsewhere, your love for learning. Where did that start and how has it had a positive impact both personally and professionally?
Oh, what a great question. I think it started on a couple of different levels. I think we all have this love of learning early in life. And then throughout college and, high school and university and sports and music, I think, Damon, when I got to kind of my mid-20s and early 30s, I actually think that love of learning kind of plateaued. And I think what had happened was I kind of got to a certain level of athletics, certain level of music ability, certain level of professional capability. And I seemed to be with companies that were taking a little more from me than teaching me, or maybe I wasn't open to it. And, I ended up investing in an MBA, an Executive MBA in my low 30s. And it triggered this just re-engage that love of learning, where once you get into an MBA, you understand most things in business aren't that complicated. You can learn anything. I thought finance used to be a bit of a mystery. It's not really. It's pretty simple. And then it just kind of triggered this thought that, hey, anything can be thought through and learned. And I just get these dopamine hits from learning. So you and I were talking offline. I'm also, I still play hockey. I like to drum in a bar band. I'm not very good, but I slowly get better. I take drum lessons again. The kid who comes in before my drum lesson, he comes out, he's 9 years old. I'm older than his mom. His mom picks him up and then I go in for my drum lesson. So like I'm the old kid in the class, but I just love learning new ideas, keeping an open mind, and that belief that through practice and rehearsal and hard work, you can continue to improve.
Do you find that as people climb the corporate ladder and get more senior roles, they tend to get to a position where maybe they feel like they know it all or they're not really open to learning as much as they used to be?
I do find that at times. And sometimes we get brought in to train some of those companies, Damon. And one of the hopes is that, our training program actually re-engages that growth orientation, that growth mindset. But I do find that sometimes that we get stuck in and we achieve some things in life, and maybe you're listening to this and you're running a sales territory, you've been doing it for a few years, and you're pretty good at it, and you're executing all the time. I think at times it gets hard to take a pause and go, hey, what's the next thing I need to learn? What's the next thing I want to learn? Sometimes that's driven by the people we report to, right? If you have a great coach, a great leader, then they might invest in companies like yours or mine to come and help the team. Or that kind of leader understands their job is to really unleash your potential if you're part of their team. But not all leaders have that perspective. Sometimes the leader's under a lot of pressure and they kind of default to seeing you as just another set of arms and legs to help them achieve their objectives. And so I think salespeople today really have to look at the environment they're in and get a little bit away from, hey, how much money am I making? And get a little bit closer towards, what am I learning every year? That's really the most important thing, I think, at this stage for what we do, because things are changing so much in B2B sales.
What inspired you to write your new book, Learn to Love Selling, at this point in your career?
Great question also. Well, first of all, we'd been doing that kind of training. Originally when we started the company, Damon, maybe I'll go there, we started as a sales enablement consulting firm. And that meant we'd come in and we'd look at kind of mid-sized organizations and their go-to-market, and we'd look at the strategy, the structure, the people, the process, and tools, and we'd come back and make recommendations on how to elevate sales performance in a reasonably short period of time, almost like an outsourced VP of sales. And back then, what we would do was we would send the team away for training to some of these great companies, methodologies, Miller, Hyman, spin selling, some of these challenger sale existed in those days. So all of those things, we'd send them outside for training. One of the things we realized over time was that there was no single methodology that you could go to that would help you convert whatever core B2B business capability you had into revenue. There were methodologies that helped with the questions you ask. There was methodologies that helped you understand the buying team kind of making a decision. But there was nothing that said, well, how do I jump into a sales territory and actually think through all of the things I need to think through to convert my company's core capability into revenue? So that's why we wrote the book. We wrote that methodology.
And who would you say is really, if you had to narrow it down, the target audience for your book?
Anybody in B2B sales today. If you manage a sales territory today, we believe there'd be some value in this book to you. So it's going to help you create your sales plan for the next year. And then on a quarterly basis, it'll help you recalibrate that sales plan, to react or respond to whatever's happening so that at the end of the year, you're in a good position.
And Mark, I'm sure you've seen this because I sure have. A lot of times at the beginning of the year, you create your sales plan, your individual sales plan, and then you literally don't even know where to find it afterwards. How is what you teach both in your book and through your training, how's that different than the status quo?
And the smile, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's unbelievable when you say that, because first of all, it's so true, Damon.
Totally.
And we literally will come into companies and they'll be so proud to tell us about their annual planning process. And then I'll go, well, how's Jim doing against, his goal that he came up with 6 months ago? I have no idea. Nobody's seen it since January, since we all did the offsite. So as part of the book, what we do after talking about the core elements of the sales playbook, so what that individual needs to build in terms of their sales plan, we also have a few chapters in the book about sales leadership and how the sales leader sets up a cadence to make sure that we're tracking against that plan that this individual came up with. So that's a key thing here. I mean, you want to make sure the plan is simple, easy to understand, it's strategic and tactical, but then we have to track progress against it, and then recalibrate based on the results.
I think simple is a key one, because if you make it too complex and
Yes.
unclear, then salespeople don't want to do it to begin with anyways. So they're just going to push it aside. So in your book, you really have broken it down into 4 key components. What I'd like you to do is walk us through those 4 key components, but also share with us why did you land on those 4 to focus on?
So thanks, David. Let's think about any core business capability out there. We think there are these 4 key elements to convert that core capability into revenue. And sometimes there can be a 5th, which I'll talk about, which we left out of the book. But the first one is value proposition messaging. So our value proposition is this three-legged stool where we communicate what we do, how what we do as a core capability ties to a desired business outcome of a client. So what are we going to do for them? And then our competitive differentiation. So how are we unique and different given there are other options in the marketplace? If we're in B2B sales today and we can't answer this question, who are you guys? And, why should I consider you given the fact I'm using somebody else today? If we don't have a good answer to that question, we don't really deserve to be speaking to any buyer out there. So we have to get this value proposition messaging down right. And it's not an easy thing to do, by the way. But once we understand our value proposition to our market, we then have to prioritize the pursuit of the market. That's the second step of the process. That starts by first understanding our ideal client profile and then deciding how am I going to build opportunities within my territory of that ideal client profile, both looking at my existing base of clients, can I grow share of wallet? And then how do I prioritize the pursuit of new logos or any companies not doing business with us today? So if I want to be productive, I got to be very intentional about how I spend that time. Third element of it is I then have to reach out to them and make something happen. I have to create demand. Your business, Damon, my business, we're both privileged. We'll get some inbound leads that come into our business. Many of them come from both of our books. But usually it's not enough to keep the funnel filled with enough sales opportunities. So we have to do demand generation, but professional, modern demand generation. This is what they used to call cold calling 50 years ago. But today, there are modern techniques for doing this to get the attention and interest of somebody so that I can trigger a conversation. Those first three elements really will create a qualified sales opportunity for our business. The fourth we call sales execution. It's really thinking through sales process, the steps to complete a sale for our business, sales strategy, my plan to progress along those steps successfully, and then funnel management, understanding the volume and velocity of deals I've got to be working to hit my goals. So value proposition, territory management, demand generation, and then sales execution. Those are the four elements of the sales playbook.
What's the fifth one?
Awareness campaigns. So when we do teaching, awareness campaigns go smack dab in the middle. And for large organizations, you might think of this as marketing. And what they end up doing, frankly, is awareness campaigns might be, giving us some inbound leads that come to us like a book. It's an awareness campaign. But more likely, for most of the people listening today, the awareness campaigns and the marketing out there, they're a credibility shield when we do demand generation. So if our team's going to reach out to your company, Damon, to talk about sales training, you may, get an email from us. You might get a voicemail. The first thing you're going to do is check out the LinkedIn page for In the Funnel. Then you're going to check out the website and look for some testimonials online. You might check out our YouTube channel. So these awareness campaigns tend to be this credibility shield when we're doing demand generation.
And I think that's so important too. And this goes for sales leaders, individual sales reps, and CEOs. The importance of building your brand around, say, for instance, LinkedIn. A lot of people say, well, I don't need a brand, but you really do, because I know people are selling to me all the time, Mark. And the first thing I do is I look them up on LinkedIn. The person I'm going to talk to, I look at some of their posts, some of the things that they have to say. I think it's so critical. So I think that's a good fifth one to add. But I want to go back to value prop, because I think value prop is tough. I found it to be tough.
Yes.
To kind of set the stage for what a great value prop looks like, can you share like a cringeworthy example of one that you've come across that was just, awful?
What a great one. Let me think about it. So let's think of those three things we want to do. We want to explain our core capability. We want to tie it, to a desired outcome of a client. And they only have three desired outcomes we'll get to. And then I want some form of competitive differentiation, and it's got to be fact. A cringeworthy value proposition would be, hey, welcome to In the Funnel. We've been doing sales training for 13 years. We have the top-rated sales training program in North America.
Who cares?
Maybe that's what my website, says something like that too. No facts, nothing about what we do for the companies we work with, no competitive differentiation. That would be one. So when you get into these, what I call motherhood and apple pie statements, we give white glove service. We've been in business for 35 years. Who cares? Nobody cares you've been in business.
Nobody wants to see a picture of your building you're in either.
The building, absolutely, the building you're in, or your device, right? This is our manufacturing. This is where we do the printing. I might, if I was a printer and I had a love of graphics and all that, that might mean a lot to me. But the people who buy printing, they couldn't care less about the device it's printed on. All they care about is increasing revenue with the marketing tool they're buying from you.
How often do you recommend that an organization reassess their value prop?
Oh, what a great question. So value proposition, Damon, when we get into it, without making it too complicated, if you say, hey, I've got to explain my core capability, I've got to be able to explain the desired outcome that I provide clients, and I've got to be able to describe my competitive differentiation. So what's unique and different about us given there are other options in the marketplace? Value proposition is so hard because at the core, it's your business strategy. So when we start to think of your organization or my organization, let's say we were talking to our investors, they go, why should we invest in your company? We actually explain our value prop. We say, this is the market we're going to sell to. This is what we do. This is why we think we can compete and win with our competitive differentiation. So I think it changes slightly based on who you're speaking to at your customer organization. It might change slightly based on which industry you're selling into, because you may have certain types of competitors when you're selling into one industry like technology. You might have different types of competitors when you're selling into more traditional organizations or industries like manufacturing. So if the environment changes, where the outcomes you're providing clients change, or the competitive landscape changes, you might have to tweak it. But generally, your clients only have 3 desired business outcomes. Every client you sell to at the highest level, they want to do one of 3 things. They want to increase revenue, they want to reduce expenses, and they want to reduce risk. If what you do can help them achieve one of those things, it could be, a domino that leads to it, chances are there might be a return on investment for whatever it is you're selling them, right? So as long as those things don't change, I don't think your value proposition changes dramatically. So just to use an example. So people say, what's our core capability or our value proposition? Our core capability is, we're a group of sales trainers and consultants. Companies engage us when they actually want to increase revenue. We help companies sell better. Okay, that's why they engage us. Or they want to add discipline to their go-to-market, or they actually want to win in their market by how well they sell. But they're all tied to revenue growth. So our value proposition generally resonates with the clients we sell into. But what they're going to come back to is say, hey, Mark, there's a gazillion sales trainers out there. What's different about you? What's unique and different about you? We need a good answer for that. One of the answers generally is the fact that everybody who teaches for in the funnel, every one of our trainers has actually been a practitioner. They've run a very large material sales organization in the recent past. Because we believe that if you're training a sales organization, the people in the room can tell whether you've done it or not. They can almost smell it when you're in front of the room. The second thing we think makes us unique and different is we have a formal methodology that we've captured in a training curriculum, in a book, and in an online learning academy that enables those people who don't want to read to learn the same content with a series of short coaching videos that they can continue to go to time and time again. So does this make us the perfect company? No, it doesn't. But does this mean we think we've got some form of competitive differentiation in our marketplace? Absolutely, we do.
Now, a lot of companies struggle with exactly what you said earlier. There's 1,000 training companies. Now, there could also be 1,000 AI companies that service construction software. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is. What advice do you have for founders or leaders who struggle with finding a clear competitive differentiator?
Ask your existing clients. Okay. You've got a client base today of smart buyers, and in many cases, they've continued to support your organization for years. And believe me, they revisit the money they spend and they make intelligent decisions. So you may have this perspective on why they engaged you originally 4 years ago, 5 years ago. On a regular basis, I think it's really important to have health check meetings with your most important clients to go, hey, listen, Damon, thank you so much for honoring us with your business. Tell us a little bit about how we're doing and why you continue to support our company. Or I might even go to them and sit down and say, you know what, Damon, we're revisiting some of our marketing and our messaging, and we really want to understand what value we provide to your business. Tell us a little bit about why you continue to use us. And when they come back and go, hey, Mark, well, we really love your training methodologies, and it has a super positive implication on our new hires. That's why we can continue to invest in them. I might start to push on that a little bit and say, well, listen, that's great. Tell me a little bit more on that. How do you get a return on investment for the X dollars you spent with us? How do you measure that? How do you track that? The more I can get them to tell me more, please expand. I want to really understand why they leverage us. At the end of the day, by the way, one of the things they might say is, well, Damon, we continued to use your company because of you. We love the relationship. I'd invite you to push on that as well. Say, listen, thank you so much for that. What is it about the relationship? So hear it straight from your clients and continue to get that feedback from the market. And don't be afraid to ask those questions. What else can we be doing for you? If I were to put you in a corner and say, you have to find 2 things that we could do better for you, what can we do? But I think our client bases will tell us the real value we provide them.
And that's so important because I think a lot of times the value we perceive that we bring them is different than the perception they have. And it's important for us to really understand that. Now, one little tip that I've tried over the years, I can't remember who shared this with me, but it's worked pretty well, is sometimes during the onboarding phase, Mark, when we bring in great new reps, we actually have them sit down and talk to our customers and interview them so they can learn firsthand where Learn It brings value into the organization.
By the way, what a great idea. When you have those amazing client relationships, they're happy to share. Damon, we did a sales kickoff. We ran a sales training day for a great company called Gillis Sales. They're an outsourced sales agency for the hospitality industry. They did something so smart. They gave us a day to do our sales training, which was totally awesome. And then the second day was a client appreciation day where the clients were on the stage sharing the value that Gillis brings to them. And then it enabled the whole Gillis sales organization to ask questions and to learn. And then they did breakouts where they had very small group discussions with these clients. And really what it shows the client base is how important they are to the organization and how much they want to stay close to what's going on with the business. Because at the end of the day, if we help those clients achieve their desired business outcomes, if we help clients run better businesses, then we're going to be a valuable partner to them.
And that's exactly what you turn into. You become a partner, right? Not just a vendor. And it's almost reciprocal too, where you bring them in and they get to share their story. And sometimes they can even have impact in, some of the decisions that you make. And I think that really helps deepen that relationship with them.
Yeah, well said. And when you get to that level, as you're running a material company yourself as much as you help your clients. You're also a CEO of a very large company, material company. You understand there's certain partners that you work with. You don't really care about what you spend. You don't really see it as an expense. You see it as an investment because those companies help you run a better business. So it's an investment in either your revenue or your profitability. You don't really nickel and dime. So you don't really care about cost or in some cases service features or those kinds of details because you know those partners are going to be there for you to help you run a better business.
So let's move on to demand gen. You, in your book, I believe you say that it's kind of like the X factor of great reps. So what separates those who really excel at demand gen than those who really struggle?
The consistency with which they do it. So we've got a lot of, I'd say 75% of anybody out there in a B2B sales job today, they're actually more of an account manager than a B2B salesperson today. So they're not doing a lot of demand generation. For most organizations, somewhere between 60 and 75% of their revenue comes from their existing customer base. It doesn't mean it's totally easy, Damon. We still need talented, skilled people to do that. But if you want to future-proof your career and you're listening to this podcast today, I think what you have to have that capability is reach out in the universe and create demand for your product or service. And so what we see is even the most successful reps, they get out of the cycle of doom. And the cycle of doom is I do a little bit of demand generation, I get a few deals in my pipeline, then I spend all my time working on those deals, then some of them close and I high five, then I look at my pipeline again and it's empty.
It's empty.
Then I go through this whole process again of I got to ramp up again. It's a bit of pain and agony. It's a very slow process. I think the reps that are successful of it, you got to get away from thinking of this as a grind and start to think of this as one of the most challenging parts of B2B sales that takes intelligence and skill and authenticity and ingenuity, but make it a part of at least your weekly routine. You've got to have a couple of days in there that you block the calendar and just go, I'm going to fill the top of the funnel today and do it consistently. And Damon, we're no different. I still do demand generation for in the funnel. We're very privileged. We get a lot of inbound leads. We get some teammates that do good work here. But at the end of the day, I still have to kick in new doors for us as well.
In my belief is that if you're a B2B rep and you're waiting on inbound leads, you're going to starve.
Yes.
You really are. And, I agree with the consistency 100%. My recommendation is block your time, put it on your calendar and stay intentional and true to that time. Mark, demand gen, what does that mean these days? I mean, everything is so crowded. I mean, is it outbound calls? Is it LinkedIn prospecting? Is email still a thing? I mean, because just like everything else, you got to focus your time. So, if you're just an individual contributor and you're responsible, you don't have a marketing team doing that work for you, how would you rank those in that direction?
So I don't mean to be cheeky at all, Damon. I'm going to ask you the same question. I know you're very good at this too. But the answer to that is yes. So you talked about LinkedIn, you talked about the telephone, you talked about email. Let's talk about each of those, for a second. So LinkedIn, you have to leverage LinkedIn. There's 1 billion people on LinkedIn today. Okay, it's migrating away from that job hunt, job placement tool. It really is a bit of a sales and a networking tool, but you have to think of it as a networking tool, not an overt sales tool. One of the best thinkers we've seen out there on LinkedIn is a guy named Tim Hughes, and he's written a great book called Social Selling. And at some point in time, you should be on his podcast and he should be on your podcast. He's just a great guy. He's in the UK. He's in London.
I watched your interview with him.
Oh, did you? Yeah, he's a great guy, eh?
Yeah, great. It seems like a great guy.
Yeah, and I learned you guys would get along. You're terrific. I also learned a lot, where they think of, okay, leverage it as a social platform, so be social. Whereas what happens a lot with me today, and same with you, you're a CEO, you'll connect with a financial planner and immediately they're going to pitch their financial planning services. It's like somebody came to me at a cocktail party and immediately said, hey, can I give you my card? We should talk about your portfolio. No, I just want to talk about hockey. So be social. The next thing, let's talk about the telephone. People avoid the telephone. But you and I are probably old enough to remember there was a time when I used to get so many voicemails, it would fill my voicemail in a given day. Now what I get, instead of that, what I get today is 250 emails, but I get 3 voicemails. So I actually listen to them. And you'll stand out if you leave me a professional voicemail where you can articulate a value proposition and you show something about me. given what I do, I'm going to actually take the call. I have to. I have a moral obligation to take call from salespeople, given what we do. So leverage the telephone. And I do like telephone first. I like leveraging the telephone first. Third, with email, there are 320 billion emails go back and forth every day. 320 billion emails go back and forth every day. Incredibly difficult to stand out, and marketing automation technology has totally poisoned that communication protocol. That being said, research still says to a certain extent it works, but one of the things I would counsel people out there is a marketing automation email is fine if you're adding value but not selling. So Damon, if I know your company adds enormous amounts of value online, if you've got a piece or a tool or a bit of research that you want to help your database with, sure, send an email blast to them and say, here's something you might be interested in. Here's something that might be helpful to you in terms of the latest and greatest in terms of learning to elevate the performance of your team. But if you actually want to do demand generation, get away from email blasts. Try and move toward very specific reach outs. So use the rifle, not a shotgun, and do your research. I think if you can do your research and understand you've got a point of interest, you know who the person is you're reaching out to, you know their business, their industry, you have some value to provide, try that. Do fewer emails, make them more targeted, and let that individual know you know something about them. So that's what I'd think about doing. And I'm a Canadian. We talked about this. You're based in San Francisco. I'm based in Toronto. Of course, every analogy I use is hockey, but we just call it a hat trick. If I want to speak to you at any given time, Damon, I'm doing three things. I'm leaving you a voicemail, I'm reaching out via LinkedIn, and I'm going to send you an email. And then 3 days from now, I'm going to do the same thing again, but it's also a hat trick. So I would think about, having a disciplined approach to reaching out. And I'll probably do that 3 or 4 times. And then I'll do a breakup voicemail where I just say, hey, listen, Damon, sounds like you're busy. It's fantastic. I had a chance to try and reach out a couple of times. We haven't had a chance to connect. I think it's amazing that you're busy. What I'm going to do, I'm going to stand down for a few months here. But in the event that you actually wanted to speak to me, I'd be delighted to speak to you anytime. So here's my number, very pleasant, very positive. And then I'd put you into a nurture campaign for 3 or 4 months. And then I'd start targeting you again. So we get into sequences in the book. There's lots of different sequences and approaches that we take, but we like a multi-channel reach out, but only reach out if you know something about the person you're reaching out to. No more blind sending it to everybody. There's no point to do that. They're not reading them.
Yeah, I know. I like in your book how you talk about, warm reach outs and making it a little bit personalized. There's nothing that turns me off more. Well, maybe there are other things, but than getting an email with somebody talking about how they help Microsoft, Oracle, and all of these billion-dollar companies.
That's
Like,
right.
you know what I mean? Like, why even waste your time? Everything I agree with, everything you're saying there. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, 100%. And the phone still does work. I don't care what anybody says, even if it means just leaving voicemails, leaving good voicemails that sometimes can
Yes.
even add
Thank
value.
you.
The other one, email, I think is almost a waste, to be honest, in my opinion. But I see what you're saying. Another one I think is really good, if your organization can afford it, is conferences. We've closed some big deals lately
Yeah.
from in-person conferences. But that also takes, Mark, not just sitting there, going out and having conversations with people. And like you said, being social, but being social in person.
Well, thanks for that on the conferences. By the way, and you've seen it, right, Damon? We'll come back to your voicemail point because I think that's another one to double click on. But the conferences is the way of working a conference. And working a conference is not sitting in my booth, standing there feeling lonely. Working a conference is you're in the middle of the aisle. You've got a smile and a handshake. You're greeting, authentically greeting, the folks that are coming by and seeing you at the booth. Working a conference means weeks in advance. You're setting up meetings by getting the lists of who's at the conference, reaching out to them in a professional way, asking for a quick coffee while they're at the conference. But really, what we're trying to do is, these things kind of matter, there's a reason people set up lines outside of bars when they're empty on the inside. Groups attract groups. So you have to be that booth at the conference where people, have an engaging smile. Your natural face is a smile. You're a very pleasing, happy person to look at. Mine isn't. My resting face looks very mean. So I have to force a
I
smile.
think you're all
Yeah,
right.
you know what? I'm a happy-go-lucky person, but my resting face just does
Yeah.
not have an engaging, look. So but being smile, open, having conversations with people, and then setting up meetings, well in advance. By the way, communicating with people, when you're at the conference, leverage that conference for social media across the entire group. Talk about some of the key learnings, and then post-conference, there's going to be a lot of intentional follow-up and days blocked to make sure this happens. I know everybody listening to this is going to say, well, everybody does that. People do this, but they're never the first ones to do it. I like to be
And
the
they drop
first one.
off.
And they drop off. Thank you. I always like to be the first ones to do anything. So we have a wonderful client of ours. It's actually the reverse. They send us wonderful gifts. And they're so lovely. They're called Facility Plus. They do industrial cleaning and commercial cleaning. But they're the first holiday basket we get at the end of November for the holiday time frame. Boy, does it matter getting that first basket. By December 26th, you've had a few baskets and some flowers and everything from lots of people. That first one feels so great. So I like the idea of being first in these things and just doing intentional planning. But if our companies are going to make those investments, those very expensive investments to send us places and do conferences, we absolutely have an obligation to work that show. That's not just walking around, and seeing what happens. Sometimes, Damon, I don't know if you've heard this from folks, but they go, well, it wasn't a very good show. Nobody came by the booth. I mean,
You got to hustle.
The booth and the location has nothing to do with the success, or how our booth looks has almost nothing to do with its success. Some of our clients go to shows and we counsel them, just get a hospitality suite. Save the money from the trade show, get a hospitality suite, get a barista in the hospitality suite, or a sommelier, and bring up some, wine and cheese, and invite everybody right after the show to pop up for a quick drink and to hear from a wine connoisseur. That way we'll have lots of conversations and make some connections and maybe get a little more bang for our marketing buck. So really working the show. But I know you've given great coaching on this as well. What do you suggest regarding shows?
I think I really like what you said about being first. I think that's great, and also maybe being a little unique and different if you can. One thing that we're going to try at a big conference coming up is we're going to set up a podcast booth and interview some senior level individuals there, and start
Great
reaching
idea.
out to the conferences until May, but start reaching out to them then. But yeah, you're right. If you have a booth and you stand behind your booth and you're not hustling or not going out having conversations, I think you're wasting your time, and it can get very expensive. So Mark, whether it's through calls, whether it's through LinkedIn, whether it's through email, now you got the discovery meeting. And in your book, and I agree with this, you say that discovery meetings are the most important phase of the whole sales process. Can you kind of walk us through why it's so important, and maybe a little bit about your framework or your ideas of what a good discovery call looks like?
By the way, Damon, I just want to call it out and say thank you. Anybody listening to this, if you ever get an opportunity to be on this show, clearly Damon has just studied my book. And by the way, first of all, thank you so much for doing that.
Well, it benefits me. Thank you, because it benefits me. Because, like I said to you before, I didn't mean to cut you off. Again, I'm getting all
No.
I went out, bought your book for our whole team, and we're going to do it as a book club and go through the different key things that we talk about today, because a lot of it is super important and something that maybe you've talked about or you heard before, but there's a different way that you're talking about doing it. And it's something that if you want to be successful, I think there's so many things in there that are important. So thank you for the kind remark.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for the gracious comments, Damon. And at the end of this, ask me about that, why these things haven't changed that much in 100 years. We could talk about that a little bit too. But just on the discovery, Oftentimes we'll get brought into an organization and, they'll ask us for that hook or that closing technique as if there's some magical phrase that I can utter that's going to make everybody on this podcast kind of engage our consulting services or. And my response is that sales are made or lost during the discovery phase. And it just goes back to the definition of business to business sales. Today, B2B sales is really a little bit of management consulting. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is help a client achieve that desired outcome, that desired, business outcome. Now, there's an emotional component to that. There's a logical component to that. But I can't help someone achieve a desired outcome if I don't know what it is. So the discovery phase is so important because the whole sales process is about them. It's not about me and pitching my sales training and what's unique and different about us. No one cares what
No
they
one
care
cares.
about. Yeah, they don't care. They care about whatever their world is. They're a CEO. They care about driving revenue, reducing cost and making profit, reducing risk. I might be a division president where what I care about is running my division well and making sure my sales organization differentiates in the market by how well they sell, because I want revenue growth. I also want to improve retention and loyalty with my sales team. I also want to actually unleash the potential of my sales team so that they all progress through the organization. So the discovery phase is where we earn the right to learn about that individual and their needs and wants. What are they trying to achieve? But we really have to earn that right. We earn that right through research, so doing our homework before those meetings so that we understand them, the business, the industry, and also being able to provide some value and insight. Discovery is not about me doing qualification and asking you 3 questions that then sets me up to start pitching sales training, because for the most part, again, no one cares about the details of our sales training. What they care about, they want to understand, can Mark and his team at In the Funnel actually improve the way we sell? Can we compete and win in the market because we sell better than other organizations? They won't believe we can do that unless they know that we know a lot about them and their business and what they're trying to achieve. So you can't spend too much time in discovery. What you're trying to get is this authentic conversation, but you have to earn it. And you really are earning that discovery in every conversation with a client or prospect. And we have a nice little sales process, Damon, and, like everybody, but I really think the discovery phase bridges every stage of the sales process. You're always learning. It's ongoing. And even with existing clients, we like setting up a regular health check with them at least a couple of times a year, where we put all the current business off to the side and just go, tell me about what's going on with your business. Okay, what are the goals? What are the objectives? How are you doing against them? What are the opportunities? What are the barriers? Tell me more, tell me more, tell me more. And it's not just the things that pertain directly to what we can solve for. I just want to understand what's happening in their business. Because then I can go away and figure out, okay, given what I know, how do we help them? Might be with some of our sales training, might be with our network. Maybe we have to introduce them to someone like you and your business. I just want to make sure the more I know about that client and prospect, the better position I'm in to figure out if we can help them. And all that takes place in the discovery phase. So for anybody listening, our experience generally is that people rush discovery because they're dying to get a proposal out, because I can't wait to get a proposal because now I got this qualified opportunity in Salesforce, and it goes one stage further. Salesforce is the biggest liar I've ever come across in my professional career. If you want to be misled, look into your own CRM system right now and look at what the predictive funnel is. That is a science fiction movie that Marvel is going to come out with next year. Okay? Doesn't matter what the stage. If we do work on less, increase conversion rates, do better discovery, if we focus more on discovery, start to think about the questions we ask, then we're actually going to get higher conversion rates. Don't worry about mailing out 5 proposals. none of them are going to close.
As a sales leader, how do you help uncover those opportunities in speaking to your reps and help push them into putting that into a closed loss so they're not focusing their time on areas that are just waste of time?
I think it's a great question. I think there's some very tactical things. Like you might look at a deal and go, at a high level, you could look at some facts. What's our average cycle time to close a deal? I'd almost go, so let's say, for example, within the funnel, we got a 4-month kind of sales cycle time generally, for a major sales training initiative. If somebody's working something today in our funnel and it's got twice the cycle time, it's already been in there for twice, I automatically take it out. Nobody takes twice as long to think about it. It's not qualified. So it's dead. We don't even know it's dead. Then there's more tactical things to think about. Okay, when was the last time we had a conversation? Do we have a definitive next step? But the first question we like asking our team is to maybe play the obstinate individual and go, when they say, hey, listen, well, we're going to work with the Lembe organization and we're going to do a major sales training initiative. Our first question is, why do they need to do sales training? What are they going to get out of it? And we sort of ask those kinds of questions. Then when they say, well, listen, their head of HR has come to us. They do sales training every year. They had budget last year. They were working with a different company. They want to move to us. Here's why. Then our next question is, when their CFO asks them exactly what return on investment do they get for the dollars they're spending with us, what's the answer to that question? So we'll ask them some of those kind of questions, not to take the wind out of their sails, but to help them think about, okay, have we helped this organization really figure out whether or not they need to do this? And so for those leading who are in a sales leadership job today, first of all, your sales team is going, if they're a good team and you hired them well, they are going to be naturally optimistic. Okay, so pessimists will not last in B2B sales. They're not going to make it over the long haul. So you can't take away the naturally optimistic tendency of somebody in B2B sales. That's their lifeblood. They need to be optimistic. The role of the sales leader is to have that sober second set of eyes on a few things, to ask some of those questions, because the sales leader has to be a little bit more objective because someone's going to ask them about forecasting. So we have to help our salesperson who's naturally optimistic think through some things in terms of qualification. And all progress starts with the truth. So I can either think I've got 10 deals in my funnel and I'm going to close 3, or why don't I take out those ones that are really not qualified? So I either kill them or I put them earlier in a stage. Now I'm going to zone in on the 5 deals, but still win 3. But now I'm focusing in on the right 3. I'm spending my time and attention. I'm giving myself a little white space in my calendar to think about those things. And I'm also going to realize I got a top of funnel issue I'm going to have to worry about for next quarter.
Beyond helpful. So let's just stick with, we're talking about the role of the sales leader. And we talk about that. You talk about that in your book. I think it's, I don't know, chapter 10 or chapter something around there. Where should sales leaders spend their time?
Oh, what a great question. So sales leaders have 3 of the most demanding stakeholders out there. First of all, they've got clients they're working with. Okay. So I have to spend time with clients if I'm a sales leader. This is not 12, 14 years ago when Salesforce first got commercially viable. You know what that did? CRM systems moved a good sales leader from being in the field to sitting in their office counting stuff in the past. It really changed the role. So I love everybody to think about, if I was running a sales team today, my first stakeholder is always clients. I want to spend 40% of my time in the field with my team, in front of clients, while coaching my team. So those 2 great things happen there. The second key stakeholder I've got is my sales team. So I have to make time for my sales team through a well-disciplined management cadence, which we can talk about. And then the third stakeholder I have is my executive teammates or my board. And as a sales leader, they're going to be looking at me almost with a black and white metric of success. Okay, so I'm sitting around an executive table. I run sales, got a head of marketing, head of HR, head of operations, head of product. I've got the CEO. The only person at that table whose success and failure scorecard is public domain is me. It's on a scoreboard. Everybody else around the table knows exactly how I'm doing at all times because sales performance is public domain. But I don't really know how the head of HR is doing or the head of operations or the head of product. They have a far less binary black and white measure of success. So this is why the role of a sales leader is very difficult today and it's very stressful. Pulled in 3 different directions by important stakeholders. So I'd rather see sales leaders spending a lot of time in front of clients, a lot of time with the sales team, coaching the sales team, not telling them what to do, but elevating their performance. And then over here, a little bit of time on admin and spending time with my exec team. But that would be my third priority by a long shot.
Can you give an example of what you mean by coaching instead of telling them what to do?
Oh, so great. So another wonderful book, another wonderful guest for you, Liz Wiseman, Multipliers. Fantastic book. But we can either multiply the capabilities of the people on our sales team or we diminish them according to Liz. Stephen Covey, The Speed of Trust.
Had him on the show.
He's the best, isn't he? We had him on the show too. He's
such a nice guy, so passionate.
Oh.
He would have stayed around talking for hours. He was so true to what he believes.
This is the joy of running the podcast, isn't it?
Oh, it's the best. You get incredible conversations and learning opportunities.
Coaching is really letting somebody try something, okay? Then, agreeing on what we're trying to do, let them try it, okay? Don't jump in and save it. Don't give the answer. Finish the meeting, leave the meeting, and then sit down and go, how do you think that went? Let's identify the 2 things we really liked and the 2 things we might do differently. Coaching is this intentional process of actually elevating the performance of somebody on your team through intentional questions and a very definitive process. Telling is what happens when you first become a sales leader, and for some reason you think it's a good idea to go, I have an open door policy, because you don't know what else to do. And so you go, I have an open door policy, and for the first day of being a sales leader, that's a good idea. And then it becomes every day somebody runs in your office and goes, here's what's happening with a client, what should I do? And because you're not thinking and you're doing 5 other things, you tell them what to do. Then they leave and they do it, and it works. And so the next time they come and ask you earlier in the process, they stop thinking and they just start asking you. But now you've got 10 people doing that all day, every day, and you're literally reducing the sales acumen of everybody on your team because you keep telling them the answers to things. Coaching and leadership is they come in your office and go, here's what I'm at. What do you think I should do? And because you're well-fed, you're well-rested, you've had white space in your calendar, you go and you're actually intentionally working with this person on certain things. You go, I don't know. What do you think you should do? And then your salesperson says, well, I'm not sure. I'm kind of stuck. That's why I asked you. And then you come back and say, well, let's go at it this way. What do you think the options are? Okay. You help them, patiently help them jump outside a comfort zone, but don't give them the answer. As soon as we start telling people what to do, we think we're helping them in the short term. By the way, the reason we love doing it, by the way, as sales leaders, because it makes us feel valuable. We got all the answers. And then 6 months later, your sales team is going to be miserable. And by the way, you're going to be miserable sooner than that as a sales leader. So don't give folks the answers to things, but this is why I called out the 3 different stakeholder statement. It's so tough, as you know, because when I'm overworked and tired and I've committed a forecast to my executive team, my default is going to be, hey, these 5 deals that I said we're going to win, I better find out what's going on with all of them and I better close them. So sales management oftentimes defaults to opportunity management. And, if the end of the quarter is chasing us, then the sales leader starts getting very directive. Do this, do this, do this, do this, because they're feeling the panic of the cadence. They're feeling the panic of their quarterly targets. But it's a cycle of doom, because you get salespeople, they don't like it. The salespeople want to learn and grow, so you take that away from them. The salespeople stop feeling like they're the hero of the story. Because you're kind of the hero of the story. They don't like that either. And I will say, I probably shared it in the book, but when I first became a sales manager maybe 20 years ago, I was clearly not only was I a bad sales manager, I'm pretty sure I was the worst sales manager ever in the history of B2B business. And if there's anybody listening to this on that sales team, they're going to chat in and say, he's right. He was the worst we've ever come across in a 30-year history. I'd sort of been the Wayne Gretzky of the sales team. I got promoted on a Friday. The Monday, now I'm running a team. I have no idea what to do. And so pretty quickly, I started telling everybody what to do. They're miserable. I'm miserable because now I feel like I've got to drag 6 people along and they're not doing it the same way I do it. And I can't understand why. And then, it was only when I got fortunate enough to get promoted into a different division and I start running something where I had no background in that business. I didn't know what to do. That when, my leadership team would come into me and go, here's where we're at. What should we do? I would authentically go, I don't know what you should do. What do you think you should do? And suddenly letting people make their own decisions, letting them grow, letting their judgment flourish. I almost tripped into good management the hard way. Every time I'm on a podcast, I apologize to that original team that I made so miserable.
Question I have for you is, let's look at it from the sales leader perspective. Before you go into promoting an individual contributor into a leadership role, how do you assess to see if they have the traits and skills or just even the makeup to be a leader?
One of the things would be, has that individual who's been a very good individual contributor, have they been a good team player? Does it look like they enjoyed mentoring or supporting or coaching other new hires into the business? So do they help their teammates? Are they a good teammate? The second thing I think we could all do is sit down with the individual and say, listen, you've been a fantastic direct contributor. One opportunity for growth would be to move into a management role. Another opportunity for growth might be to work super large accounts as a direct contributor, or move into a marketing role, or move somewhere else in the organization. Do you think you'd like to move into a management role? And, a lot of us would automatically say yes, right? If I was a direct contributor, then the question is why? And I just push on it a little bit. Because I think a lot of people in sales, everybody, if you're in sales, you're probably ambitious and maybe growth oriented. And so you have this idea that moving into management, it's my next step up the chair. But unless I've got somebody who's going to get joy from unleashing the potential of everybody else on the team, they shouldn't go into management. Some people still want to be the Wayne Gretzky playing hockey. And that's okay. It's fun being in sales. I get it. And you have control and you don't have to get success through other people and it can stay about you. You can be the person. So I just think it's worthy of having that individual go away and think about it, because what we want as a leader is someone who really gets the same joy you and I, Damon, probably get today. We like working with companies and leaders and salespeople. We love seeing them improve and develop. That's the big deal for us now. We enjoy that. But not everybody enjoys that. And by the way, there's no judgment at all. You just have to understand if you're out there today, you have to understand what you like, what makes you tick, what you want. But the worst thing we can do is promote somebody into a leadership position who sees the team as kind of tools for them to still be the hero, but now they've got 8 tools doing different things for them. And eventually that team's going to be unhappy and the leader's going to be unhappy. So that's what I would suggest. We're looking for a different skill set on a coach than we are on somebody who's a direct contributor.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a different skill set, Mark. And the worst thing that could happen, I agree with you, is you have 8 people, they're miserable, and then you have this person who used to be your top producer as an individual contributor, they're miserable, and sometimes their ego won't allow them to go to the CEO or their sales leader and say, I want to, tap out of this. And so what do? They go and leave. I've had that happen with a mentor of mine who, phenomenal sales rep, went into leadership. People couldn't stand him. He couldn't stand them. I told him to have a conversation to go back with his boss. He's like, I can't do that. So he took a job somewhere else, and it's a fail all around.
Actually, I think I mentioned it in the book. When I first had that job where I got promoted and I was just terrible at it, I was pretty close. I was so miserable that I was pretty close to leaving. And because there's this save face thing too, right? You're terrible. The team knows you're terrible. You had no training. I had no training or coaching. And then I just got fortunate. Big companies sometimes make bad decisions. They promoted me to something else, even though I clearly didn't deserve it. And then I got promoted to run a division I knew nothing about. And it enabled me to start over and kind of think about it while, still not looking terrible, and just go, okay, let's think about this differently. Instead of telling people, let's kind of ask people and let them enjoy it and let them develop. So I think you have to, our next book, by the way, is on sales management. So this one was on the sales playbook called, Learn to Love Selling. The next one that we're going to do is going to be about leading. And we're going to get into some of this detail, but just really believing that you're there to unleash the potential of the team, because they feel that too. There's nothing better than when you're working for someone like that, where they're challenging you, but they're trying to make you better. That's a good situation all around.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the listeners about your book before we close out with this amazing conversation?
No, Damon, I just first of all, I want to say thank you. What a great conversation. I can't believe we've been chatting for an hour. It's been super, super fun. And team, one of the things I sincerely hope for everybody out there is listening to podcasts like this one with Damon. What we're all going to end up doing is, if we all focus on helping our clients and prospects, what we're doing is we're improving the performance and professionalism of B2B sales. We're actually elevating this business discipline into the profession it deserves to be. And then you'll be happier, right? So if we've changed this mindset, if you're listening today and you think, hey, I've got to pitch a product, or I've got to persuade or cajole somebody into it, no one wants to do that. It also doesn't work. So when you listen to these things and you study, and there's lots of good books and resources out there, I think what it ends up doing is just helps you to like what we do, and that will come across, and we're going to elevate this profession. So I love this conversation, Damon. I'd like to thank you again for hosting me. I can't wait to host you on our show.
I want to just share with our listeners a couple of topics that we didn't talk about today for your great book, Learn to Love Selling. There's a great piece on interviewing, the importance of onboarding, and, like you said, the cadence of what sales leaders should have. You could really do a deep dive on there. And what I also really appreciate about the book is there's interview questions, there's practical tools, there's so many frameworks in there that's valuable. So you got to check out the book.
Thank you.
As far as our conversation today, we talked about that, sales can be a learned skill. We talked about the 4 components, and we did a kind of not a deep dive, but we talked a lot about value prop, which I think is important, and the importance of demand generation and where leaders should be spending their time, and so much more. I mean, Mark, I truly appreciate all your time today. Where can our listeners connect with you at?
LinkedIn. Please, Damon, you brought it up in the podcast as kind of the main place to go these days. We love to hear from folks on LinkedIn. So it's Mark Cox at In the Funnel. That's the name of the company, and our website's inthefunnel.com. But please do connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me know that you heard from us, here on Damon's podcast. But if you've got a question or two, we love to answer them.
All right. So listeners, what I would like you to do, and for those of you watching YouTube, I'd like you to think of a friend of yours who's either in sales or maybe curious about getting into sales, or even somebody who's a sales leader who's maybe overwhelmed, and share with them this episode. Please do that, and then go out and purchase Mark's book. There will be a link in our show notes. And until next time, everybody, stay curious, keep learning, and have a great day.
I will become the leader that I was called to be. If I do that on a fitness journey, I will live a longer life and be able to play basketball with my grandchildren. If I live that